The news now on BBC One with Jane Hill.
Last orders on public transport. Alcohol may be banned on trains and buses. Ministers argue it'll tackle antisocial behaviour. Conservatives say it's the nanny state. A Loyalist paramilitary group says it's standing down its arms at midnight. Restored to its former glory, the Dresden Church destroyed in the Second World War. And Panorama stages the debate which affects us all. How long should British troops stay in Iraq? Good evening. Drinking alcohol on trains and buses could become an offence under proposals being considered by the government. The idea is part of a raft of measures to try to crack down on antisocial behaviour. The police have backed the plans, but the Conservatives have accused ministers of going too far. Our Home Affairs correspondent Christian Fraser reports.
On a quiet station in Merseyside, a passenger is waiting for his train when he's approached by a group of men. He falls within feet of a live rail. It could have killed him. Here's another attack on a station worker. It's this kind of senseless, unprovoked violence which is now commonplace on platforms and stations around the country, and a lot of it is fuelled by alcohol. British Transport Police are said to be in full support of these proposals. Their figures show that violent crime rose by nearly 12% on the UK's railways last year, the London Underground one of the biggest problem areas. In all, alcohol-related incidents grew by almost a third. The police said a large number of the 10,000 attacks on passengers and staff were fuelled by alcohol, and with the introduction of 24-hour drinking, that problem could get worse. Politicians agree they'll have to tidy up this problem on Britain's public transport system, but they're at odds over how to do it.
It is right that people should be able to have a civilised drink at whatever time they want, but it is right also that people should be responsible about not being abusive through drink on buses and other places.
But for some, a drink is essential relaxation on a sometimes tortuous long journey home. And on the back of the smoking row, this is another example, say the government's critics, of nanny state politics.
I don't think stopping somebody from having a beer or a glass of wine on the train on the way home after a hard day's work is going to be the answer. And if the government is so concerned about alcohol-fuelled violence and disorder, why are they insisting on pressing ahead with 24-hour drinking and extending pub opening hours, which is only going to make the matters worse?
Respect is the key word in Tony Blair's third term, and this is the latest idea in a long line of proposals to tackle binge drinking and antisocial behaviour. It is possible the government is testing the water here, but the fact restrictions are being discussed while other ideas have been killed off suggests it has at least the Prime Minister's tacit support. Christian Fraser, BBC News.
In the last hour, the paramilitary group the Loyalist Volunteer Force has said it's ordered all its units to stand down. In a statement, the LVF said its move was in a direct response to the IRA decision this summer to end its armed campaign and put its weapons beyond use. The LVF is the smallest of the Loyalist paramilitary groups. Our Ireland correspondent Kevin Connolly is in Belfast. Kevin, how do you assess the significance of this tonight?
Well, it's certainly been an evening of rapid developments in the Loyalist paramilitary world. First of all, we got news that a long-running feud between the UVF and the LVF was over. We heard that from an influential Protestant clergyman. Then a few hours later came word that the LVF was standing down. Now, as you said there, it's trying to pitch that gesture as a response, a strategic response to what the IRA did in the summer when it stood down. But I think the reality is much likelier to be that the LVF, which is very small, which was under enormous pressure during this feud, has been forced to wind up its activities as the price of achieving a truce for which it was desperate. Either way, though, whatever the underlying political reality, the truth is that a period of dangerous instability within loyalism may well be over this evening.
Kevin Connolly, thank you. Investigations are continuing in the Indian capital Delhi after 3 powerful explosions killed 59 people just days before both Hindu and Muslim festivals. More than 200 people were injured and the city is on high alert. A previously unknown group has said it carried out the attacks. From Delhi, here's Mike Wooldridge.
Clearing the debris on what should have been Delhi's busiest shopping day ahead of the Hindu celebration of Diwali on Tuesday. And among it, at this blast site, earthenware pots that had been destined to hold the lamps during the Festival of Light. And this, the remains of someone's shoes. There was much poignancy in the carnage caused by the bombers. This amateur video shot in the immediate aftermath of the bombings, capturing the panic and the fear that descended on this capital city with this coordinated onslaught. In the debris here, the search for clues goes on. The authorities say they're on maximum alert across this city in the aftermath of the devastating string of bombings. India, said one official, will never be defeated by terrorism. But the biggest question of all today, of course, is who exploited the high vulnerability of crowded markets ahead of two major religious festivals. Measuring the evidence, there was intensive forensic work going on today at the three blast sites. And investigators said they were working on several leads, but they remained wary of laying the blame on any specific organisation. Some Indian-based security experts, though, are less reluctant.
Although an obscure underground Kashmir group has claimed responsibility, this appears to be the handiwork of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, which is an Al-Qaeda-linked Pakistan-based organization that has been labelled a terrorist body both by India and the United States.
Tonight, increased vigilance as some shops reopened at Sarojini Nagar, where there was the largest number of casualties, and as they lit the lamps. Not for Diwali, but for the victims. Mike Wooldridge, BBC News, Delhi.
American officials say nearly 26,000 Iraqi civilians have been killed or wounded in attacks by insurgents since the beginning of last year. The figures were released as funerals were held in the northern city of Baquba. 26 people were killed in a car bomb attack in a nearby village. Senior Conservatives have called for the Work and Pension Secretary David Blunkett to resign if new claims that he broke the ministerial code are found to be true. Mr Blunkett stepped down as Home Secretary last December. He briefly took up a company directorship in April, but he's now acknowledged he should have consulted an advisory committee before he did so. Vicky Young reports.
David Blunkett is a minister under pressure. His decision to become the director of a company specialising in paternity tests is being questioned. He gave up the job in May when he returned to the cabinet, but opponents say he may have broken ministerial rules.
I think there needs to be a proper independent inquiry into what's happened to establish what the rights and wrongs of this case are. But my belief is now that there are so many question marks over Mr Blunkett's judgment that it's very hard to see how he can continue credibly as a minister in the current cabinet.
There are guidelines which ministers have to follow so that there's no conflict of interest between their job in government and what they go on to do in the commercial world. The ministerial code states on leaving office, ministers should seek advice from the Independent Advisory Committee on Business Appointments about any appointments they wish to take up within 2 years of leaving office. Mr Blunkett admits he didn't do that. A statement says he believed that he was acting within the ministerial code, but with hindsight it might have been better if he'd written to the committee prior to Parliament returning. Last year, Mr Blunkett was forced to resign as Home Secretary when it emerged his office had fast-tracked a visa application for his former lover's nanny. So some are surprised he hasn't stuck more carefully to the rules this time.
He seems to be an increasingly accident-prone minister with a string of bad judgments over a series of different issues, and all of this can only be distracting away from the major agenda of welfare reform which the government ought to be pursuing.
Tonight, Downing Street said David Blunkett had the full support of the Prime Minister, and Cabinet colleagues insist he's doing a good job.
Most people who know David respect him for his honesty and his integrity and his decency too, and I think those are the important things in politics that at the end of the day really count.
Mr Blunkett's opponents say that endless speculation about his private life and his business dealings is a distraction from the job that he's supposed to be doing. Most damaging, though, is that some people are now questioning his judgment. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
The British Ports and Ferries Group, P&O, has confirmed it's in talks about a possible takeover bid. P&O's profits have fallen dramatically in the last year. The Gulf state-owned company Dubai Ports World is thought to be behind the approach, valued at about £3 billion. The writing standards of Britain's teenagers are better than they were a decade ago. One of the largest ever studies of exam papers suggests that today's students have a wider vocabulary and use better punctuation. Daniel Bircher reports.
Homework before the new school week. Pressure to improve literacy skills is, according to this latest piece of research, yielding long-term results. The study compared the writing skills of teenagers stretching back over a decade, looking across the whole ability range and comparing work through the years from GCSE English papers.
Quite frankly, the students have got better. Students seem to be able to use their language better, their better vocabulary, they're more ambitious with the sentence structure, they are using punctuation in a better way than they were 10 years ago, and even the spelling is, it's holding its own.
The research comes at a time when GCSE grades overall have improved, though as in other years there have been debates about whether some papers have got simpler or students have chosen easier subjects. And employers' organisations say they still see too many school leavers lacking adequate basic skills.
We hope that the government's current sort of emphasis on basic numeracy and literacy will work through, but as yet we haven't got any feedback from our members. And we're still very concerned, not only even if GCSEs have improved, that still around 40% of kids don't even get A to Cs at maths or English.
The government says this study shows pupils are improving their English skills at GCSE. The researchers say they're only looking at specific writing ability, but believe that will feed through to the jobs market in the coming years. Daniel Bircher, BBC News.
Thousands of people have gathered in Dresden in Germany to celebrate the reconsecration of the city's most famous church. The Frauenkirche was destroyed by Allied bombers during the Second World War. From Dresden, Tristana Moore reports.
They call this the miracle of Dresden, the Church of Our Lady in all its splendour. Today, a ceremony to consecrate the church. After more than a decade, it's been lavishly restored. A Baroque gem in the city which was rebuilt piece by piece. This was the scene in February 1945 as British and American planes dropped thousands of bombs on Dresden. They created a devastating firestorm, and the Church of Our Lady was reduced to rubble.
It's till today a nightmare. I heard the cry of women and children and the sounds and the lights and the bumps. And it's difficult to express.
Today, thousands of people gathered outside to watch the ceremony. They came from all over Germany and all over the world. And there was also a delegation from Britain. Dresden is twinned with Coventry, which was bombed by Nazi Germany.
This is a sign of new life, it's a sign of hope, it's something wonderful.
And here it is, the Frauenkirche, in all its glory. It was left in ruins by East Germany's former communist rulers, but the people of Dresden wanted to have their church back. And tonight, people are still queuing to go inside to catch a glimpse of the Frauenkirche. Tristana Moore, BBC News, Dresden.
Now with news of a good win for Celtic and the rest of the day's sport, here's Mary Rhodes.
Thank you, Jane. Good evening. For the first time this season, Celtic are on top of the Scottish Premier League. They beat Dundee United 4-2 in a thrilling game at Tannadice this afternoon to move ahead of Hearts on goal difference. Andy Swiss reports.
For Celtic, the equation was very simple. Win and they'd be top of the league. The match, though, proved rather more difficult. They did score early, but unfortunately for them, in the wrong net. It's the sort of header Chris Sutton would normally be proud of. Not this time. But Dundee United's lead didn't last long in a breathless first half. Celtic found their bearings with a crisply taken equaliser from John Hartson. And once Sean Maloney's shot had been deflected by Sutton, this time into the right net, they seemed to have turned things round. Not quite, as Dundee United struck back immediately and in some style, courtesy of Colin Samuel. Again, though, the response was instant, a Celtic corner wending its way into the net via the back of United defender Alan Archibald. The second half proved rather easier on the nerves before Stephen Pearson sealed Celtic's win and ensured there's a very familiar name at the top of the table. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
Newcastle United's revival is continuing thanks largely to Michael Owen, who scored twice in their 3-0 win at West Bromwich Albion. Following a first half of few chances, Owen scored moments after the break with what turned out to be the best goal of the match. And you can see all the highlights of that match and the rest of the weekend's Premiership action on Match of the Day 2. That's on BBC 2 at 10:30 tonight. Colin Montgomery has won golf's European Order of Merit title for an unprecedented 8th time. The Scot finished joint third in the Volvo Masters at Valderrama, which was easily enough for him to end the season on top of Europe's money list. The tournament was won by Paul McGinley, who was celebrating the biggest victory of his career. He finished 2 shots ahead of Sergio Garcia on 10 under par. A last-minute penalty from Mark van Gisbergen earned Wasps a 5-all draw with reigning Heineken Cup champions Toulouse, but it may not be enough to take the London club through to the knockout stages of the competition. The English champions drew level with the last kick of the game when van Gisbergen claimed his 5th penalty. Wasps must now win their remaining 4 pool games to have any realistic chance of progressing. And finally, Tim Hemman's tennis season is over. The British #1 has withdrawn from the Paris Masters with a rib injury. And that's all the sport. Jane.
Thanks, Mary. Now let's find out what's happening in the weather. Here's Isabel Lang.
Thanks very much, Jane. Evening to you. We saw temperatures creep up to 21 Celsius today at Gravesend in Kent. That's an amazing 70 Fahrenheit. And it looks as though we'll keep the mild trend all week. Maybe not as warm as that, but still very warm for this time of year. The southerlies also bringing with them a lot of cloud, though, as I'm sure you're aware. And we've got clouds streaming in now from Iberia, running up through France and affecting eastern parts of England. Not much rain yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of tonight we saw quite a lot of rain gathering across southeastern parts of Britain, whilst the north still sees a few showers. Look at that rain there, fairly extensive across parts of Kent, Sussex and Essex, even as far as London. I think there'll be some rain in the morning and a veil of clouds streaming up to maybe Manchester and Newcastle. North of that, though, a lovely start. It'll be fine and mild and really quite sunny too, and maybe Belfast starting dry, but look at this band of showers, some pretty lively showers developing across Northern Ireland in the morning. That'll be an area of weather to watch, really, and those showers will gradually develop and run into more western parts of mainland Britain through the day. Further east, thankfully, we get rid of the rain fairly smartly from East Anglia, so for many central areas away from those weather systems, you'll do okay on Monday. There'll be some decent dry weather and some bright weather too, and warm enough at around 15 or 16 degrees. Not bad on Tuesday. A little ridge of high pressure will calm things down a little, not too breezy. Many places getting away with some sunshine, but all change again on Wednesday. Low pressure driving rain right up across the British Isles, windy to the south, and I'll tell you something, there'll be a lot of showers to contend with as well, so very mixed midweek. Back to you, Jane.
Isabel, thanks very much. Finally, a reminder of tonight's main story. The government is considering a ban on drinking alcohol on buses and trains. That's the latest from the newsroom. Now here on BBC One, Panorama asks how long British troops should stay in Iraq. Here's David Dimbleby.